tēnā koutou katoa. Nei te mihi kia koutou I tēnei wā, I tēnei komiti. Ai, nau mai hara mai. E nā mane nā reo, e nā karangaranga taha maha, nā kaikaunihera, nā kaimahi, e nā memo o te hapore e wā taki nei, tēnā koutou. Hi, welcome to this meeting. It's good to be here for our second Regional Leadership, Climate and Community Resilience Committee. Looking forward to our meeting today. And I'm just going to start with Karakia and then we'll move into our business. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai e hia ki ana te atakura, he teo, he hoka, he hauhu, ki hei uri ora. Kia ora koutou. Yeah, like I said, welcome to this meeting. We've started the recording, and of course it's going to be recorded and it'll be made available on our website. We've got a quorum, so that's great. We do have, and I'll declare the meeting open, got to do that. And we are going to make a slight change to the order of business today, and we're going to bring item 9, which is our public excluded item, forward to just after item 7.1, so after we confirm our minutes. And I'll explain a bit more of that when we get to it. So second item is apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Cranwell and Councillor East. I don't think there's any more. Right, and Claire Mackay just for lateness now. Conflicts of interest, I haven't been informed of any, so I don't think we've got any. We've got no public forum, deputations or petitions. We've got no extraordinary or urgent business, and we've got no notices of motion. So I'm going to move us on to item 7.1, which is our minutes of our first meeting on 29th of March 2023, and that's on page 10 of your agenda. So yeah, is anyone going to speak to this or that? We're just going to go. So has anyone got any issues they want to raise with the minutes? No, other than that, I'll ask for a mover for our recommendation there. Councillor Burns and seconded by Councillor Robinson, and that's that this committee confirms the minutes from the committee meeting on the 29th of March. All those in favour? Right. Any against? No, carried. Thank you. So now, like I said before, we're going to move to our item 9, which is our public excluded part, and this is to do the paper that's in there. Now, I just need a motion from someone so we can move into public excluded. Can I have a mover for that? Councillor Burns, Councillor Edge, second. No, not yet, not until we do the resolution. Yep. So here's the resolution, and there is that's the people that shall remain, Ross and Kimberley, after we exclude the public. So well, there's no discussion. Yep. Got a mover, Councillor Burns, seconder, Councillor Edge. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Carried. Cool. So we're going to go to public excluded. We'll stop the recording, I'm sure. People, yeah, a couple of minutes. People are going to leave the room, and then we'll get on with our matter there. Kia ora koutou. We're just going to reopen the meeting, and so we're coming out of public excluded. And so during that session, the committee agreed and appointed Alice Docking and Oscar Bloom as the youth members to the Regional Leadership, Climate and Community Resilience Committee for the remainder of the 2022-25 Council Triennium as our youth members. And I'm happy to say that they've signed their documents and that they can now come to the table. So I want everyone to stand and welcome them to the table. No mai hara mai, Alice, Oscar. Kei wānginu I a mātou I tēnei hui, tēnei komiti, o te kaunihera tau ki Waitaha, nei te mihi ki a kōrua. So welcome, thank you, and it's awesome that you can join us. I might just let you, quickly, this is breaking from a bit of protocol, just let you tell us a little bit about yourself, just real itsy, small, and then we'll carry on our meeting.
Sure. Kia ora. Thank you for, I guess, voting us on. It's really, really exciting to be here, especially because of the last year and a bit of process of working it through. But yes, I'm Alice. I am in my 4th year of university. I'm studying a Masters of Planning, so my first year of my Masters. and I've just graduated from an undergrad in environmental management. For both of them, I'm at Lincoln Uni. And I'm the co-chair of the Youth Role Through this year and Christchurch South representative.
Kia ora, I'm Oscar. I was part of Youth Role Through for a few years, and I'm the chair of that 2 years, and now I'm studying at University of Canterbury, doing law and a Bachelor of Arts majoring in media and communications. And yeah, really happy to be here, really grateful for the opportunity, and really thankful for the work that Alice and Youth Role Through have done, obviously, to help get this roll through. Yeah.
Kia ora, I'm going to hand to Chair Scott.
Yeah, thanks, and welcome and well done to get us to this point in time. Just acknowledging the work, Alice, that you have done up till now, and having dealt with yourself and what was the other, and culture, and the amount of advocacy that you and culture put in was fantastic, and it's good to see you here. We've got you down the safe end of the table, which people want to put you in different places, but you're down the safe end. I'm just not too sure, Alice, about endorsing you. We don't need another planner in this bloody room. We've got heaps of planners. But I think the significant thing about that is you'll have an understanding of what we're trying to do anyway, and the things that we're doing. And I look forward to the discussion and your involvement in some of the debates that we have here. So welcome.
Kia ora, Chair Scott. So yeah, just reiterating that, yeah, again, welcome. Acknowledge the work that the Youth Role Through has put in, especially like Chair Scott said, yourself, Alice, and Coulter, but also your leadership in the past too, Oscar. And it's great actually that you know, you're not on the Youth Role Through anymore, but here you are. So that's great. So thank you again. We're going to move on to our next item, and that's 8.1, and that's the Regional Leadership Climate and Resilience Resolution Stage Report. Now, I've just been informed that all the orange ones on that report are now green with the completion of this. So Catherine was going to come today, or Tafflin, but because it's all completed, we really need to do that. But I'm just going to move, therefore, to, I'm assuming no one's got any questions or clarification about the resolutions report, since they're all green. In that case, I'd ask for a mover of this motion. Chair Scott and Councillor Southworth, and that is that we note the status of the previous resolutions provided and the status of the committee resolutions report, April 2023. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Oh, carried. Thank you. You can say aye next time. All good, or no, whatever. We're going to move to 8.2, and this is the portfolio work program report. And I've got Jess Burgess is going to come to the table, and Emma Davies, to introduce this paper. Thank you. I'll hand over to you both.
Tēnā koutou katoa, through you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of this paper is to update the committee on the progress of the regional and strategic leadership and climate change and community resilience portfolios. This is including the Leading Flood and River Resilience Program, which is reported through to the Catchment Resilience Committee. Note for the committee, the recommendation there on page 36 of your agenda is to receive the work program report for Q3 for those portfolios. In the paper, which I'll take as read, there are a number of notable recent achievements and issues that have been raised relating to both portfolios. There are a number of staff here in attendance to answer any questions. So through you, Mr. Chair, happy to take any questions from here.
Cool, thanks, Jess. Do I have questions? Clarification, yeah. Councillor Rich.
Thanks, Chair. I have three questions. Page 38, item 20, reference to level of service 24.2, where we're working with landowners where there are landfill sites threatened by impacts of climate change. I was just wondering, in terms of where those landfill sites have been approved by local authorities, do local authorities take the responsibility for dealing with those?
Looks like Tim to respond.
Yes, through you, Chair, and kia ora for the question. The majority of the sites are owned by local territorial authorities for a start that have been identified. So in a way that doesn't come about, but the responsibility for cleanup lies with the landowner. So if it was a private, then it is with the landowner rather than the territorial authority. In our role in this, and just for the clarification in this, that our role is identifying the risk and then prioritising those for immediate cleanup. Then we work with the owner to ensure that it happens, and that can involve help to secure funding. So sometimes we've assisted with that with the Ministry for the Environment cleanup fund. There's ongoing discussions at the moment, for example, with Timatanga District Council are talking to the Ministry for the Environment about the Peel Forest one on the Rangatata, the possibility of kind of exchange of levies and using it to clean up rather than paying waste levies. They're in discussions around that. And if necessary, we would move to enforcement. But it's very much that 4 E's approach that we talk about quite often: the educate, engage, enable, and enforce, if that is necessary. So that's our role in it. But your direct question, it is the responsibility of the landowner to clean up, but the majority of the ones we're dealing with are owned by territorial authorities.
Grant, I think I've got some supplementary questions. So Councillor Scott, and then I've got Councillor Southworth.
Don't mind, Chair, I'd like to just continue with that, in that vein with Dr. Davies regarding the mitigation of landfill and the waiving of the fee. Has that been resolved? Do you know?
I don't believe it has been resolved. I think there's still discussions ongoing, which is very much between the Ministry and TDC. We're not directly involved. MFE, yes. So I may well.
Sounds like it, Peter. And did I hear Councillor Southworth? Are you happy? Yeah. So on to you again.
Thanks, Chair. My second question was page 41, item or the target 32.2. There is reference to the delivery of the increase in schools joining the EnviroSchools program of maybe being at risk. And I had thought that last meeting I had queried to see if there was a map describing where the schools are and where geographically they are, so that if there were gaps that perhaps councillors could participate in trying to fill those gaps through making some contacts in their local area. Just wondering if where are we at with that?
Kia ora, I think Kaplan's got a response.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there was some information actually collated for councillors, so I will double check and make sure that we sent that through to you following the query last time. There is a map, so there is information that we can show, but also it isn't necessarily the schools needing to be nudged into showing an interest. It's their capacity to actually respond. So we've got schools who want to be engaged with us. It's just working slowly with them, if you like, and bringing them on board, because it's quite a commitment, particularly the EnviroSchools piece is quite a commitment from the school. So it's not that we necessarily need to drum up more interest, it's more that we just need to work slowly with them. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Yeah, no, I realise there's a bit of a process in COVID-19 and stuff. My third point was to do with page 42, target 35.3, where we talk about identifying or monitoring priority consents greater than or less than 80%. And there's a comment there in the blurb there that we prioritise responding to pollution events and cases of significant non-compliance ahead of routine monitoring. I was just wondering, in those cases, and I'm thinking of the fact that these things are things that perhaps should have been done in a consenting process. Are fees or penalties paid for Environment Canterbury staff to do additional monitoring to resolve those issues? Are we collecting some kind of fee for that?
To David, yeah, David O'Connell.
Kia ora koutou, through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So my understanding is that for pollution events, if it's a consented activity, then we can pass the costs associated with investigating and following up on that pollution event from the consent holder. If it's an event that doesn't or isn't associated with a consent holder, then we can seek costs for that, but under the Resource Management Act, they are not compelled to have to pay it. So we have, for all of those events, we seek and we strongly suggest that the person involved or the party involved reimburse the council for the cost associated, but we don't currently have the ability to require them to pay that cost. In saying that, the changes to under the resource management reforms currently, that will change going forward, and council will have greater ability to recover costs for those types of events.
Right, thank you. Final question for me, page 44. It's not really a question. It's the People's Panel in the third column there. I'm wondering, it would be interesting, there's 267 people signed up for the program at the moment. I'd be keen to if you could, perhaps if staff could provide us with a bit of information about the demographic character of the people who are on the panel, and perhaps geographical distribution would be useful as well.
Kia ora, that's noted. Yeah, thank you. That's an action. Thank you, Councillor Rich. I've got Councillor Korako, then I'll take Councillor Swiggs and Councillor McKenzie and Councillor Scott. There you go, Councillor Korako. There you go, Councillor Korako.
Alice, Oscar. There's a wonderful whakatauki, and I think would actually put forward exactly, I think, how we've all been here. That's Puna, the other thing, so whanake, actually means allow our youth the opportunity to grow. So, sitting there today, take it, really passing it.
Oh, Councillor, sorry.
My question goes back to number 13. Kathleen, your answer originally to what Councillor X was actually inquiring around about those schools. And my question there is that if it's not a matter of actually, identifying them and going and seeing if we can actually assist or whatever. So what are the reasons that are creating, some angst with them that they can't either continue with the program or they're finding it difficult? Is one of them funding?
Through you there, I'm going to phone a friend actually, because we've got Kimberly in the room here. Kimberly, you happy to answer a question around Enviro schools? Yep, and what the barriers are to the schools? Is that all right?
Come to the table. Yeah, come to the table. Yeah, for sure.
Good. The numbers are moving in a very good direction. So we have got a whole bunch of Enviro schools ready to sign up now. It's just a little bit of a long process, as Chaplain has alluded to get them to do so. A lot of it is just simply part of the process is that we need to get all of the staff together to have a meeting, because everybody together in the school needs to agree they want to be an Enviro school. Other programs in schools, many of you will know, sometimes the principal signs on and sort of gets piffed on the teachers is another thing. So part of this program is everyone from the principal, the caretaker, they all agree. And sometimes it's just a matter of waiting until they can actually get all those staff together in a room to have that presentation. So it is just a time thing usually. Also, of course, some schools have signed up to other programs this year and they're saying, yeah, maybe next year would be a better time for us. We haven't had any financial issues. It's a free program for the schools, which is awesome because it's supported by Environment Canterbury.
Thank you for that. So it's really what you're saying. It's actually it's a timing sort of mechanism thing, but also the other thing is when the boss goes and signs up, then he passes the rako or the baton down and says go for it. So that's the other part of it. Okay, thank you for that. Can I just one last?
Yep, I'll push the button. Sorry, push. Yeah, push your button. Push your button. Yeah, sorry.
That Councillor Burns has been onto this one, but it would be good to have a map actually in these papers when we're talking about like school, and so we know actually where they are, because that just helps us actually. You know, we have a lot of papers to read. More specific detail in it would be really good as well. Thank you.
Kia ora, thanks, Councillor Korako. I'll go to Vicky, Councillor Southworth, and then I've got Councillor Swiggs, Councillor McKenzie, and Councillor Scott.
Thank you. So, sort of on the same theme around information, I was interested to know a bit more about the People's Panel in terms of the sorts of topics they're being asked about and where that's sort of going to head in the future in terms of growing that particular piece of work. And if I could just add on a little comment around the Enviro Schools, just saying it's an incredibly determined and committed team in the Enviro Schools programme, remembering that we got the funding for the increase in numbers because there were 40 schools sitting on the wait list. So we know that there's demand when the schools can work together and get so great fit, and actually 17 schools coming on the programme is fantastic achievement. We just had a very high bar to hit at 25.
Got it, Councillor Southworth. F, you going to answer it?
Yep, I can answer the one about the People's Panel, and thank you for the comments around the Environment Schools work that's been done. So the People's Panel, as you recall, it only launched at election time last year, and so the first survey that we put out was really how do people find out about local elections, how do they know it's on, how do they know that when they vote and so on. So that'll help inform our campaign for the next election. The second one we did was around how do people know that they can give us feedback and what mechanisms are and what barriers are there to people providing feedback. So again, that's useful for all of our ongoing work. So the last one that you heard about this morning, which was the climate change piece, that's the start now of getting into some specific detailed surveys, which are a little bit more targeted to some of our work programs rather than in general. Where we hope to get to with the People's Panel is actually getting sufficient numbers across the breadth of the region and also the different demographic groups, so we can actually start to target. Now we're nowhere near that with less than 300 on that panel at the moment, but that's where we're hoping to get to. So each time we do a new survey, we sign up more in order to take part in the survey, but we're not yet at a point that we can start to really target that group.
Just thinking, I mean, is there something that we as councillors, councillors can do? Would you like to maybe share with us something that we can do to help promote signing up for that?
Yep, through you, Chair, we would love you to do that. So whenever we're putting out a survey, we'd very much like you to share it on your channels, please, because the more people we have, the better representative sample we'll get when we do the surveys, and the more meaningful it is for you. So yes, please, we would love that.
So I'm assuming it's open to sign up at any stage, but maybe if you could send us a link or something that we can promote through our social media or whatever, that could be good. Cool. Thank you. Councillor Swiggs.
Hey, thanks for the report. On page 38, point number 16, we're at 38% year to date at the moment. Do you have any projection of what we may achieve?
This is in relation to the monitoring of consenting compliance, I think so.
Thank you through the chair. I don't have those figures today, and Aurora Grant is the manager. She's actually, I checked in with her. She's going to provide more information at a briefing at the end of the month. So yeah, she's getting that information together.
Okay, can I ask a follow on? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and then we'll go down to page 42, I believe. yeah, 42, and number 35, obviously the whole lot there, it's quite, this is a critical part of our council. And just following on from that one point there is the context is key. I'm just wondering whether we can get instead of just words without much context. I mean, I see that in the last line there, there's a bit of context that the pre-applications from 2020, we've still got 300. That's gone down from 400, which is great. But can we get a graph so that we can keep an idea of where we're tracking and how we're tracking? Because I think that context would be key. So the question, I suppose, is can we get a graph of some form so we can have better context?
Kia ora, if I can come in through the chair. Thank you. We'll take that on board, and that's what we're looking at as far as information for council to monitor where we're at with regard to and progressing with regard to consent backlog. So,
just one follow on from that. Be really good to have projections, and if we're going to do that as well, so that we can sort of monitor against what you're thinking we're doing, what our performance is, and then how. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Swiggs. Is this a related question, Councillor Robinson?
All right, so no, yeah.
Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, thank you. I've got two questions, and the first one is related. I'm not sure Dion quite answered it, but we've been told that the backlog for consent applications is various numbers from somewhere like 800 to 900 to now this report is saying 300. And then on page 45, it talks about the historic backlog. I guess I'd be interested in knowing what the actual number is for everything. Are we talking about page 42 and page 45 talking about two different sets of backlogs, or are they the same one? First question. You can have a crack at that, please.
through the chair, thank you, councillor. I'm not sure. I couldn't answer your question right now, but I'll take that away and find that and feed it into when we come back with the milestones and how we're proposing to monitor and report against the backlog. We'll factor that in.
Thanks, David. And I'm aware that in the community there's various numbers being talked about, and I thought I had the number, but I'm not sure that I do now. So that would be really useful. Second question, and this goes back to the question you answered at the start about how you recover money for consent investigations. Can I just get this absolutely clear? When there's a pollution event and it's related to a consent, you can claim the costs. If there's not a pollution event and the consenting officer investigates, you're saying that those costs might be sent to the consent holder, but he doesn't have to pay them.
So yes, in general, if the pollution event was large scale and went, for example, to prosecution, then the court could impose a fine on that activity. So it's not necessarily the recovery of the cost of our staff, but the fine for the incident. But generally speaking, if it's not consented, the ability to recover cost, we don't have any compulsion or way to require people to pay that cost that has effectively borne by the ratepayer.
But if it is consented, but there is no pollution event, but the consenting officer piles up a significant investigation account, is that consent holder required to pay that account?
Yes.
Great. I've got Councillor Scott or Chair Scott.
Thank you. Mine's pretty much the same vein. It refers to 16, but I'm more interested in, but I guess we can get this from Aurora also, is the availability of people, because that seems to be one of the choke points here. So maybe we can just include that in Aurora's update, if that'd be the easiest way to handle that, Emma.
Yes, I'll capture these points for Aurora to include in her briefing. Yep, and particularly noting the consistency in the figures because I can see that, and so we'll get really clarity around those figures for you at that briefing.
David's got a response as well. Yeah.
Can I, we can get that information, but I think it's important. For example, a recent recruitment process to recruit 12 planner vacancies within our consenting function. We did not get one suitable applicant at the level we needed to appoint into that role. You know, so this is really a demonstration of how tight the labour market is and the difficulty to get this skill set, which is not just unique to us, it's across the country and will be even more so as we move into the impact of reforms and the like. So we also recognise or have noted that the environmental planner skill set is not listed on Immigration New Zealand's priority skill sets. And so there may be consideration for how we need to raise that need because it is a skill set that the country is crying out for.
Got it, David. Thank you for that. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Mine is regard to page 48, number 22. The partner with Ngāi Tahu City and District Councils and the community to review regional coastal environment plan. I mean, clearly it's not been achieved to date, and has the risk of that been looked at really beyond what we see in front of us? Do we have other options to look at addressing some of the urgent concerns in the area? Thank you.
Kia ora, through you, Chair. Yes, absolutely. The Te Rōpū Tuia meeting last week discussed this. And one of the things that they identified that needs to be done was identify targeted changes to the RCEP, ones that urgently need addressing. So they're going to come back to us at the next meeting with a list of the things that they think need addressing. While we can't, we don't have the time to do a thorough review of the coastal plan at this stage, but we can do targeted change. We'll look at targeted changes that they'll bring back to us.
Well, first of all, can you just tell us again who you are? Sorry, just give your name so yeah, for the record. Yeah.
Araha mai, I'm Jeff Smith. I'm team leader, strategy and planning.
Go on, Jeff. Thank you. You got a follow-up question?
I just, from that meeting, I thought that was an optional suggestion for people to bring back some of those lists. It really is, it needs to be done. We need to look into it quite quickly, in my opinion. And I just think, how does Ngāi Tahu feel about this delay? Thank you.
I don't think that can be answered by the staff member, Genevieve, but I think, yeah, all good. And look, I think a good answer though, that you know from that meeting last week that there is going to be that little big piece of work going on, and once we get that back, we'll be in a better position to understand what the next step is. So I think a good response in terms of the positive around a targeted changes could be made. So let's see when that work comes back and will we get through to that. I think that's all of our questions on this paper at the moment. Thank you so much for the patience there from the councillors and also the staff, and yeah, great answers. And as we discovered last time, this report is quite critical because it covers so many areas of the council's business. So thanks, Jess and Emma, for the work there and all the different teams that go into this. Yeah, and lots of interest, of course, around the consenting and the planning work via schools, etc. So yeah, thank you. So after receiving all that, I want to put this to the table. Have I got a mover? Councillor Edge, seconder, Councillor Ward. So and this is around receiving the work program that we've just heard about. And that, remember, that includes the leading flood and river resilience program. So, any discussion on this from councillors? No, and our members? No, all good. Okay, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Any abstentions and all that? No, all good. Thank you. Carried. Okay, we're going to move to 8.3, and that's an update on It's Time Canterbury. And I'm going to call to the table, or it might be online. No, we've got the team. Cool. Rebecca McKinney and Mark Ralston to come to the table. Thank you so much. Look forward to hearing the report, and of course, we have a presentation, don't we? Cool. Thank you. So I'll hand over to you guys, and thanks so much. And the team will help you there, get that all up.
Tato, everyone. I am Beck McKinney, and this is Mark Ralston. We're from the Communications and Engagement Group for Environment Canterbury. So today we're going to give you a run through, a bit of a background about It's Time Canterbury. I know some people are more familiar with it than others, and for those who aren't, hopefully it'll give you a good grounding and understanding of where we're at. Talk about the development of the campaign and the brand work, the platform to date, current activity and market, and what our next steps are. So a bit of a background here. The importance of developing a platform for the climate change conversations across the region was first raised in 2020 by Councillor Southworth and also Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie. The Canterbury Mural Forum at the same time had been having conversations and also knew there was a need for some sort of communications activity to reach across the region around climate change. So to achieve the best results possible, it made sense to bring this work together to make the best use of resources, but to also ensure that the community was getting a clear and consistent message about what was happening around the region. So off the back of that, funding for It's Time Canterbury was factored into the long-term plan for 2021-2031. The It's Time Canterbury timeline here just shows you a few of the key milestones that you can, I guess, sort of really inform the campaign as it's being developed. So probably one of the most important points here was the climate change stocktake conversations that happened in 2022 between Environment Canterbury and with councils across the region. That gave us a really good picture of the resource that was available within councils, what they thought about messaging and where things should be. How did they see it moving in the future? Did they have any plans to communicate more broadly? And the answer to that was really resources were tight. There was a very keen desire, and we really needed to work together to get on the same page. So that was a very informative point for us. The other really important point in this timeline was when we did a campaign review back in August 2022. We'd established a really good platform for the campaign through a website, using social media, having some campaign activity out there. But feedback we constantly got was, it's very Wellington. And that was primarily, there was a yellow base used for a lot of the design graphics, and it didn't really resonate with a lot of people who were seeing the campaign. It certainly stood out, but whether it meant Canterbury to them, that was a different story. So that, along with feedback on the messaging, really informed the refresh that we did on the website, but also around the creative activity, and Mark will take you through that in a little bit more detail shortly. So a big part of this, and I guess part of making it work effectively, is understanding who does what. At Environment Canterbury, we take the lead to develop the region-wide approach. We support the other councils to ensure they've got the resources they need, and support them to come up with story ideas and different material, and encourage them to push the campaign material, but also to use the brand device and graphics that we have there. We actually inform the messaging that's done. It's all based on scientific evidence-based information. And again, Mark will talk to you about that a little bit more. We work very closely with our chief scientist, our strategy and planning teams, and we also have a subgroup across councils that we meet with regularly to ensure that messaging is, I guess, aligned to primarily the Tonkin and Taylor report that was done in 2022. A lot of the key messaging has come out of that. We also manage the brand and the related assets. Up till about a year ago, that was all outsourced to an external agency. Was really quite costly. We feel very strongly that we should be using the funds we have to reach the community with the messaging and ensure that we utilise the expertise we have in-house. So that's a really important part of what we do. With the councils, a very important part of their role is to be the conduit into the staff within the councils, but also elected members. We find there's a very strong level of enthusiasm at mayoral forum level, which is fantastic, and with the CEs, and also at the operational team level, but to get those things to gel together to ensure there's the resource and the time, the focus and consistency around the activity is really important. Part of the council's role is also to provide a local lens to us. We need to ensure that the campaign material and all of our content is reflective of the whole region. We don't want it to be Christchurch centric. We understand that we're a very diverse region. We're the largest geographical region in the country, and that brings with it a number of challenges and opportunities when we're communicating to different people. So getting those local stories that people can connect to and that resonate with them is super important to us, and that is the best way that we can do it. What else have we got there? Ensuring the branding is applied. It's just a little thing, but ongoing we do encourage people to use the It's Time Canterbury logo. We all know a brand isn't just a logo, that's just a device, but just so the community can connect the fact that we're all working together across the region. And active participation in the subgroup is really key to the success of It's Time Canterbury, which we'll talk to now. So in 2022, we plodded along working with the councils, but we just found we needed a little bit more structure. So we formed a subgroup which mainly composes of communications and marketing people from across the councils, but some of the smaller councils didn't actually have people in place that could step into that role. So they put in subject matter experts or someone they felt could connect throughout their councils with what we were doing. Really, their role is to channel that enthusiasm, get consistency of messaging, ensuring they have a voice and an opportunity so that it's not just what we're saying, that they can actually have input into how things look, what we show, how the messaging can be specific to them, and that it reaches the whole region, as I said before. So we've just listed the members there, but as I understand it, you'll have the presentation. There's been a few vacancies throughout the last 6 months or so, which you get in every organisation. So we just make sure material keeps going out to someone in the council in the meantime. And this little graphic here just shows you that it's a very complex beast in many ways. Mark and I are here today, but there's a really broad range of people with different skills and expertise, both within Environment Canterbury, the councils, and externally that feed into the success of It's Time Canterbury, and we're really dependent on that.
So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our updated messaging that we developed last year, and it's feeding our campaign activity this year. So when the campaign was, when the platform was initially launched in May of 2021, the messaging was developed from a few sources, Massey University, at the time, Canterbury District Health Board, there were ECAN councillors involved, the Climate Change Working Group here in ECAN, and also the Hawke's Bay Regional Council we consulted with, who'd done some similar campaign work around climate change. But for the updated messaging, it was informed primarily by the Tonkin and Taylor Canterbury Climate Change Risk Assessment Report that Beck mentioned, that was commissioned by the Mayoral Forum. And then once we had that, we had discussions with the strategy and planning team and the science teams. We really wanted messaging that gives us an opportunity to highlight positive action and stories from across the region. The It's Time Canterbury tone has always been not downplaying the seriousness of the issues, but still being optimistic. And we maintain that science-based, what we're expecting, mitigation information. But now, as I say, we're moving towards more a focus on action that's happening around the region and some of the stories that we're starting to tell. So yeah, you probably can't see it very well, but in the green circle there's all of the challenges highlighted by that risk assessment report, and strategy and planning and science identified 3 priorities for us to work with, which are biodiversity, Rirengararopi, water, why, and sense of community, hapori. And these, we think, give us a great sort of fairly broad spread for storytelling. Sometimes something we're doing might touch on all 3 of these key messages, and sometimes we might sort of narrow focus a bit onto one of them. Once we had these priorities from strategy and planning, we put our comms lens over it to make it a bit more relatable to our audience, and develop these 3 high-level messages. And beneath each of these 3 messages, we have secondary messaging, which basically forms most of our campaign activity and communications. The other important thing is that this messaging, having this locked in place, doesn't preclude us from introducing new messaging as situations arise. So, for example, the anniversary floods in Auckland and Cyclone Gabrielle earlier this year put a focus on that extreme weather element of climate change. So, as that was a topic that people were concerned about, for example, I went down to the Civil Defence down the road here and talked to some of our team there who had been up in the North Island helping out with that response, and worked with them to develop an article for the Sun Canterbury website on preparedness and how Cantabrians can prepare. And that article is up on the website now. Speaking of the website, so something that came out of those around the time of the climate change stock takes was another look at our website. So we had feedback from a range of users who'd used the website. That's people around here at Environment Canterbury, people in the Canterbury Mayoral Forum, and some of our own usage even. And we saw an opportunity to make the navigation of the site a lot easier for people and the information on the site a lot more digestible for people. Some of you may remember the old yellow site. It had quite a lot of very chunky blocks of text on it, which the content itself was good, but the presentation just needed a bit of a rethink. So we had these content blocks developed. Now every page on the site is essentially can be segmented. That makes it a lot easier to break up those walls of text with different types of content from imagery and videos, and also gives us a lot more flexibility for updating and changing things on the site. Related to what Beck was saying about bringing that design work in-house, it just sort of frees us up to do things ourselves a lot more quickly and a lot more cost effectively. And also we introduced the use of white backgrounds to the site, which is an accessibility issue for people with screen readers and things like that. It makes the site a lot easier to read, but also for sections where there is still a lot of text, like our new news section. It's just, a bit easier for people.
Okay, so this brings us back round to how do we evolve? What makes sense? What we did is we looked at a range of imagery from right across the region, and we wanted it to be bold and fresh and surprising. It had to be accessible. That was the first thing. But we wanted to broaden it out, yet keep it somewhat contained so it wasn't all over the show. So we looked at imagery, and from that we drew some darker colours, some lighter colours. We had a number of sessions with different members of the subgroup and creatives to discuss what might work, what might help us keep that tone of being optimistic but not frivolous at the same time. And how would that work for future use? How could it be evolve to the point where it would work for infographics, for different visual campaigns if we want to keep a bit more consistency. So this is the base colour palette we landed. It is a little surprising, I think, when you look at that and you think, well, it is all taken from a natural environment, but some of those colours are quite bright. So we didn't want to play it down and get too muted, but we wanted it to be reflective definitely of the Canterbury environment. And this slide here shows you how we've evolved the illustration. So on the left, you'll see it was quite an abstract sort of style for the first round of creative. People really struggled to actually comprehend what some of these meant. I think, you know, the agency had a great idea around it, but when you laid it out, it was a little hard to go, what is this actually saying to me? So it was a little too abstract. We then evolved it and just did a little trial with a campaign to see how it would go if we made things a little bit clearer. The message was a little bit stronger and we added a little bit more colour to get a bit more engagement and flexibility. And that went really well. We got very good feedback, particularly on the outdoor billboards that you would see sort of in some of the main throughways, but even in press and social, we got a much better response. Then the last one you'll see is where we're landed now. So pretty confident, strong lines. It tells a clear message. This was probably the most challenging one to land. There was a bit of back and forth with science, strategy and others. Trying to say, how do we show that sea levels are going to rise? Well, it's pretty old school, but what about a ruler? So I think this one is a really good example. It lends itself really well to animation and gives us a lot of options to move forward with down the track. It also means that we can translate it into just a one colour version. So for example, white, and we can use that on the background of the photos or video to keep that consistency of messaging and tell little stories as we go. And this just shows you what the suite of tiles on our website looks like now. So you'll see originally there was one icon for two of them, which was a little confusing. And we hope this is pretty clear to people now. Yeah, bold, simple, clear is what we were going for. And with the opportunity to continue to evolve it as we need to with different messaging and different channels that we use.
So speaking of those channels, so the campaign we've got live in the market at the moment, these are the channels we're using. I don't need to go through them all, I don't think. You can see a couple of examples there of our social ads. That's Facebook and Instagram there. But some of you may have seen some of these things around. They've been in market since about mid-March. Digital billboards, digital ads, some A3 posters, print ads, and bus backs. Something that we favoured where we could is sustainable channels, given what It's Time Canterbury is about. So we're only using digital billboards, not any print billboards, and the bus backs, for example, we only put them on a couple of the EV buses. So yeah, we're always thinking about that kind of thing with our campaign work. And the results of the campaign so far, as I say, it started about mid-March, but these numbers are from the beginning of March. The goal for this phase of the campaign was to bring people to the website, and it seems to be doing quite well so far. I've got some updated stats from this morning. So the paid social media impressions are now over 180,000. The website sessions are over 3,600. We've got 626 social media followers, over 20,000 website sessions in total since the beginning of the campaign. And we've picked up a few more newsletter subscribers. The newsletter is something that's kind of next on our list to kick back into gear again. We're going to do a newsletter in the next couple of weeks and then push that sign up page on social media again. So we should pick up a few more subscribers there. We're always looking at the best way to make use of new and existing channels. So the This Time Canterbury Instagram, for example, now that we have some new design assets and we are starting to get some more video and things like that, we're going to start using that a lot more, but also sharing more It's Time Canterbury content, both with the TAs, but also with Environment Canterbury's own channels as well, the Facebook, that sort of thing. Some other related activity over the last 6 months or year or so that we've been involved with. So we have regular meetings with our science and strategy teams. One of those is the Climate Change Resilience Workstream meeting, which happens once a month. But we also have a weekly catch up with the strategy team and one or two other people from the comms and engagement team, just to sort of check in on what we're up to, if there's anything happening around the organisation that might be useful for us to know. We've recently joined the Aotearoa Climate Adaptation Network, which, as you can see, it's a forum for local government people to discuss what they're all doing in their various parts of the country. I've been to a couple of their webinars now, the first of which was somebody from Ministry for the Environment talking about their plans for a climate change communications campaign, which was quite interesting to hear about. And yeah, the potential that somewhere down the line, if that all goes through, that at some Canterbury may be able to be involved or supported in some way. And in November last year, we hosted psychologists Brian Dixon and Terry Morrissey, who I'd been to a workshop with them in Wellington a couple of months before that. They'd been on a roadshow around the country talking to local councils and a few other organisations about how people are engaging with the public around climate change and any barriers to that engagement. We had a few people from around ECAN join, as well as members of the TAs. And yeah, it was a really interesting session just to sort of get that psychological view, which we don't often get. And some of the opportunities and learnings that we've taken away to this point, with the website now in a better position, and we've got the updated messaging and branding. The focus is to tell more stories from around the region, and the move towards action that's happening is a big part of that. And I think now we've got the platform and the channels really in a good place to get these stories out there. In terms of the integration of Te Ao Māori, we had a few meetings with the Tuia team to talk about the way forward with this. One of the upcoming stories we've got is a video story about the impact of climate change on the Ngāti Wheki community and action that's being taken there. And we're working with a filmmaker who's part of that community to tell the story from his perspective and the perspective of the community, which is exactly the kind of stories we want to start telling more of. And the last thing is active participation from the TAs. So the campaign, as I said, is doing quite a good job of bringing people to the website, but we find we get the most engagement when the TAs are sharing It's Time Canterbury content on their own channels. Just a few weeks ago, we had the second highest single day website visitors since the campaign began. And that was a day that 4 of the TAs shared one of our posts that linked back to the site. So yeah, just getting as much to the TAs as we can is a big priority for us going forward.
So we've just listed some of the highlights and challenges we've experienced, not just in this phase, but I guess since the start of activity. A definite highlight is the enthusiasm and support of the Merrill Forum. So we try to regularly keep them in the loop. We've done several presentations at various stages of the process to them, and certainly encourage the people on the subgroup to feed across and up the chain when they go back into their councils. The high level and supporting messaging, drawing on knowledge and expertise from across the councils has been really great. When we start digging down into those stories and activity that's happening, there's some real gems there. So we need to keep the momentum with that going. And I think that's just, these regular check-ins are great because people get so busy with their day-to-day tasks and their jobs, and a lot of them are doing It's Time Canterbury off the side of their desk, so within the council. So that's really important. The updated website branding and design, we're really happy with where that's landed, and initial feedback has been very positive, and I think we're seeing the numbers coming through even more importantly. So that's definitely a highlight. It's been quite a long path to get to that point, particularly with the big sort of COVID break in between. So to get that momentum up and running and re-establish a platform that we can start moving up from is really positive. The collaborative relationships that we're seeing now come out of even the sessions like Mark mentioned, when we're getting experts in to talk about what they do, or someone who's working on a project, and getting people together and just having that shared experience of hearing people's stories and getting ideas and talking amongst ourselves is so important. So we really need to keep that going. And also the strategy is very agile. We do understand that this is more the backbone, sort of holding it all up, but other things are going to come and go. So we need to be able to just adjust and sort of ramp up communication or change the messaging when we need to, and ensure that all the appropriate people get that information at the right point in time. And that's something we have done. In the middle of lockdown, we pulled the outdoor advertising. There was no point paying thousands of dollars to have things on big screens when no one was driving around looking at them and had a lot more on their mind. So yeah, we're just really conscious of needing to be agile with this one, as well as consistent. So it's finding that balance. So establishing a collective understanding and syncing the mayors and the CEs is an ongoing theme. We think it's improving, but again, it just is that constant communication, encouragement, support, and sort of defining who's doing what to ensure that we can get the appropriate activity out the door. Where the different councils are with their climate change activity was somewhat more of a challenge prior to the climate change stock take, because I think it was done with the assumption that everyone was on the same page, but that became very obvious that they weren't. We're in a much better place now, and I think it's not as much of a challenge anymore. Resourcing is an ongoing challenge across all councils. As we said, we've pulled a lot of this work in-house. The budget for It's Time Canterbury is $150,000 a financial year. But really a lot of that in the first year was going on outsourcing the work to creative agencies and other people to deliver the work. So by drawing on our in-house expertise, we've really managed to make sure that we can push the messaging out, get some more interesting activity and market. And I think the other thing with that is we really haven't touched on events. That was something that really sort of fell to the background off the back of COVID. A lot of things were cancelled, even coming out the other side of it. So we're really looking to opportunities to be visible at more events and support and enable the communities and the councils to use the It's Time Canterbury branding and materials to be out there and right across the region. So that's really important to us. There is, on occasions, a reluctance to use the It's Time Canterbury branding. I'm not talking about the whole shebang, the look and feel, but even the logo itself. So some councils are a little bit more advanced in where they're at with their climate change comms and have very distinctive looks and feels, and others have nothing. So again, it's finding that balance and having those discussions at the appropriate time. And delivery of the original strategy was a challenge, but it's not a problem. So we've just adjusted that. We're moving forward, and I think we're in a much better place than we were 12 months ago. So what are our next steps? We've got to monitor and adjust this campaign as we're going, and already we're doing that. Mark mentioned the story about flooding and emergency response up north. Just keeping our ears open, those comms channels open, and encouraging people to feed in stories so we can adapt to that as we go. Then we'll produce a post-campaign report that we'll make available. Progressing with stories, a wide range of stories. Some are very short. They might just be, say, 15 or 30 seconds. Great opportunity to grab a wee snippet and get something up on social. Others may be more of a longer burn, or they might feed into supporting something else. On Friday, we're actually off doing a photo shoot with our chief scientist. We're hoping for good weather, because last time she was up a mountain and freezing weather and had to wear a hat she didn't like. So we're hoping to avoid that for the shoot. We're hoping for fine weather, but that will be focusing on seven different themes. And they're just little short videos that we'll pull together using some of the animation and the graphics, really getting to the point of this is the issue, this is what it means to our community. So looking forward to that on Friday. We'll continue to evolve the graphics and the creative. Really, we want to head down the path where we have a lot more infographics that tell a powerful story so that people aren't having to scroll through paragraphs of information. It can certainly support that, but we want that to be really accessible and impactful for people. In July, excuse me, we'll be reviewing what we've done this year, looking at what's our baseline moving forward, where have we done well, where can we improve, how can we change it up a little bit, and then we'll be back into planning, and we'll be looking at our planning to support the climate change action planning engagement that's happening around the region. So that's a really great opportunity to make it visible. Mark and I are hoping to also get out and about, so keeping those comms going with the local councils to get out there, talk to the staff involved and those who are even on the fringes of it, about what does this mean and what's the opportunity for them to tell their stories, to understand, to get their family to follow it, to get us to come and talk to their football club about it, whatever it might be. We're open to those opportunities, so we'll be looking to do that off the back of our planning. Yeah. Any questions?
Well, thanks, Beck and Mark. Yeah, I've got Councillor Korako, and then I'll take names down after that.
Tēnā kōrua. I got probably one observation first of all, seeing we've got two Rakatahi councillors in here. I don't get a feel around any kind of engagement, with youth within this. The other one, and I don't envy you whatsoever in this, but you've got 10 councils. And then because basically I think what you need to be getting out of this is actually the Te Tiriti partnership. So you've got my own runanga there of Ka Te Wheke. But how have you actually involved the other mana whenua groups actually across the councils? Be interesting to, did you go to council and have they all got Māori advisors, for instance? Is that who you talk to? The other part of it is that if it's so collective, this whole thing, particularly around 10 councils, did you talk to Te Runanga o Ngāi Comms, who actually are responsible for the whole 18 papatapu, to know how to actually engage with, either all of them, parts of them, and all of that? That's my question.
I can pick that one up through you, Chair, because at the beginning we did that and we talked to Ngāi Comms, and we had a beautiful vision of it being the 10 Papatipu Runanga and the 10 councils and doing that piece of work all together. That hasn't been realised. We haven't been able to do that. In fact, we'd love some help to do that. And there've been some changes in Ngāi Comms, so we can now start picking that back up again. So there's a new GM who's just come in there actually. There's been 2, 3 in between since we started this. So we can now pick that back up with them. But the pieces of work that Beck and Mark are just picking up, we're really just starting that journey again. And one of the experiences that we had when we first took it to Ruapetuia, and we missed a trick in how we took that to that group initially. So going back when we first started this, and we launched in and said, we've got this great idea and come on board with us, and we got that engagement piece wrong. And so we've now coming back in trying to do it differently. So if we can pick that up with you afterwards. But yeah.
So on that though, because it's actually about councils. The main sort of hub of this thing is about councils, isn't it? And so how have they, brought into the Te Tiriti thing? Or is that a big part of this, or is it not?
It absolutely, the intention is it's a big part of this. And to be honest, we've tried to take that on ourselves to do it. But actually, I like where you're going with that in terms of putting that back to the other councils, the member councils through the subgroup to pick that up, because we have tried to own that ourselves. And part of it is telling those stories. So when we did go to Ruapetuia, we had a great conversation where we realised our engagement and how we were bringing it wasn't appropriate. But once people started talking about what the Runanga were actually seeing and observing in the environment, that was gold in terms of some of those stories. That's climate change right there. That's being observed on the ground. And so we wanted to capture some of those things, but we've had to sort of take quite a few steps back to come forward. But I'm picking up on what you're saying, that going back through the TAs.
Thank you. Because this is the glue. This is really the glue between Papatipu Runanga and those councils in a lot of ways.
Kia ora, I actually had a really similar thought in my mind when I was, listening to the presentation, and there did just seem to be that, hole there about Papatipu Runanga and Tron. So it's great that you're aware of it and that we're going to do some work on it. And to your point, Nook, about putting it back on the TAs, look, this is something at the regional climate planning that we're doing. We've got representatives from the TAs on that group under the Merrill Forum, and there is a conversation, and you heard it this morning about Te Rūnanga and Papatipu Rūnanga have been invited to that meeting, and that's an ongoing discussion. And I think landing that is important in this conversation too, because there's a connection here between that leadership at that level and then flowing through to this program as well. So yeah, it's definitely a live discussion, and definitely important in this space. So thank you. I've got Councillor McKenzie, and I've got Oscar, and I've got Greg, and also Councillor Davies.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I've got some questions really around your campaign materials, and I apologise for being old and perhaps slightly grumpy and quite cynical, but the advantage of being old, or the disadvantage of being old, is I can remember the days of Canterbury before it had widespread irrigation, and in the middle of summer where the whole region had to shut down because of the fire risk. Yeah, part of your campaign, I know your campaign is all about saying that we're about to face apocalypse. But when you say our rural communities will face greater fire risk, what sort of thought processes go into these sort of campaign banners? Because when I think about what's going to increase fire risk, it would be a reduction in irrigated pastoral areas in Canterbury. It would be an increase in neglected land, and it would be an increase in dryland farming compared to irrigated farming, which isn't related to, and those risks would make Canterbury go back to the good old days when Nooks forebears set fire to the Canterbury Plains, and the soot was deposited on the Antarctic ice shelf 500 years ago. You'd struggle to get a good fire going at the moment.
They were Anglicans.
No, the soot went down there. Not the fire wasn't there. The soot went down. So I guess what I'm interested in there, when you set these campaigns, how much thought goes into that, and what are your reference points? Because in fact, fire isn't an issue, significant issue in Canterbury. It is a very localised part, not a regional issue, unless we make some particularly stupid changes around how we manage Canterbury in response to climate change. Did you get my question?
Yeah, the messaging comes from the scientific base of that climate change risk assessment report, and the projections in there show that as temperatures increase, we're going to see a longer fire season, and that's essentially what the background for that message was. But yeah, all of those messages on the billboards and all of our messaging come specifically from the projections in that report and our discussions with strategy and science.
Well, you need to think about the history of Canterbury in that messaging. Simple comment.
Thanks, Ian. Fiona, did you want to make a comment, or you happy? Okay, thank you. I've got Oscar. Is it right?
The greatest fear of my grandfather and my father and myself in my younger days was a fire starting somewhere around Darfield and coming right through to the sea. And that was a real profound fear and genuine. So that takes me into the 80s once, and then irrigation had taken over. And yes, we still get isolated. We've had some events. So to say, I understand how climate change will drive things and a whole bunch, but for us, we have lived the last 30 odd years, 40 years in a space where fire has not been the risk that it was. So if you're going to speak to the rural communities and those that have invested over generations, they will look at it and bother.
Thank you.
So I've personally been involved in this kind of work for a while through the youth Ropu, who were engaged at a very early point on the original messaging. And I guess my question was about, obviously there's numbers around engagement, but do you have any way of measuring the impact of the campaign? Because I know when it was first being kind of formulated, it was about changing, my impression was about changing behaviours and giving people information and then gaining that information. So I was wondering if there's a way of, rather than just messaging the engagement and people seeing it, measuring like that change. Oh, yeah, I've got two questions. That's the first one. Yeah.
It's certainly the intention to measure as we go, but as we said, we've sort of gone back to this baseline of establishing the messaging and coming up with something that tells the story in a clearer way. And even if I think people agree or their own personal, I guess, perception is maybe not the same, it'll get that conversation happening and that awareness building starting to accumulate. Certainly it is the plan to measure as we go, and behavioural change is still what it's about, as well as that ongoing education. So part of our review at the end of this phase is looking at how do we measure it, how do we work with strategy, how do we work with science, how do we work with others, to look at some ways of actually quantifying what we're doing, what we're saying. It's behavioural change is a very slow thing, but there's some things that happen over shorter periods of time. So it's really some really good in-depth discussions with the right people to ensure that we're measuring as we go now that we've got this baseline to build from.
Cool, thank you. And my second question was about I thought I had it on, sorry. Obviously, I think originally it was about information sharing. I was wondering, with that pivot, are you looking to target a different audience that isn't as skeptical of like climate change's existence, or are you trying to do both things through sharing stories rather than the information?
We're doing both things. We're still sharing the basic information. We're still sharing more advanced information in that space. But a really good way to convey information is through telling stories. People find it more interesting, more engaging. Some people do, some people don't. They like the facts and figures. So that's still there for them. But we really find a better way to reach the audiences and to get them more actively responding to us is through a story. And that's why that localized messaging is so important too, because, a story about someone buying an EV in Christchurch may not resonate with my sister who lives at Waitauri Flats and, is driving a tractor today. So we've got to be realistic about this. That's a really big part of what we do. So, it's a tricky balancing act, but we will never lose focus of the fact that we're there to provide that scientific, evidence-based information that spans the region, and we will help the TAs to support them to get out more specific targeted information around issues that might be more relative to their particular community or a group within their community at the same time. So yeah, that's our approach.
Great. Kia ora, thank you. Kia ora, kōrua. Thanks very much. That was brilliant. I have two questions, if I may. The first one is, given the connection to the Merrill Forum, would it be possible for you perhaps to look at pre-commissioner when we had a regional biodiversity coordinator who did an amazing series of videos, online videos across the region, as perhaps an example of then and now, given that we've got sort of a decade and a half since that time?
Right. Entirely possible, and we're always really keen to hear about anything like that, and we can go down the path of having a look at it. But yeah, then and now is always good. Great, great footage, great stories. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And the second question is, I've just come back from a trip down to Mackenzie, actually. Thankfully, at this stage, there's only just over 50% of the basin irrigated. My question is kind of a silly one, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Would you suggest to the Mid-Canterbury councillor that a trip down to South Canterbury into Mackenzie to look at the fire risk down there might be a good thing to do? Kia ora.
No response.
I know.
If I could just respond, absolutely there's a fire risk, but it's on the undeveloped and unproductive parts of the Mackenzie country, and the parts that are developed and farmed actually have a much lower risk of fire than the undeveloped. And that was exactly the point I was trying to make. If the intent of adapting to climate change is to turn the Canterbury Plains into the undeveloped parts of the Mackenzie country, you're going to get a much greater risk of fire than climate change itself will ever impose. It will be bad decisions made by this council, not the effects of climate change.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the Councillor Davies.
Thank you for the presentation, and it's really nice to see the evolution of the design as well. Do you foresee us using political leaders as spokespeople in this campaign? Because if I remember rightly, Chair Huey had a design in which he was quoted alongside Mayor Dalzell, and that was a good way of raising the profile of our political leadership.
Absolutely, we can do that within the constraints of what we can do when we're in an election cycle. So that changes things a little bit. But, you know, this is really dependent on people who have a profile within the community, getting out there and sharing the message and sharing it with their networks on LinkedIn or, you know, at a presentation, whatever it might be. So we're always happy to support developing that material too.
Just the second question, the vacancies on the subgroup, is that a kind of new triennial delay or?
No, that's because of individual councils having a little bit of a churn in staff at periods in time. And I think earlier we heard about the challenges around recruitment. That's real for all councils. So it's just been a bit of a placeholder effect until they can get someone else into those roles. But I think the main thing is really, particularly with the smaller councils, they just don't have the resource to totally focus on something like this. You know, they turn up to the meetings, which is great when they can, but we really do have to do a lot of heavy lifting with this campaign. So that's why it's good to delineate our responsibility versus theirs, but understand that we need to support them, you know, when they're lacking in resource. But that obviously takes resource from other areas that we're working on here.
Davies. I've got Councillor Each next. And then is there anyone else that I've got you, Vicky, but is there anyone else who wants to ask a question? That's all good.
Thanks very much for this. I like the simplicity of the messaging. And in terms of the fire risk thing, I think that that's totally appropriate for rural communities. It's not just rural communities who have irrigation around them. Just going to make a comment because it's silly, the argument. A lot of our greatest fires in the last 10 years are in our wilderness, natural environment, tussock grasslands. Tekapo recently had an issue. I live in a rural environment. We are going to heat up. El Nino is coming. It could be an extended time period of drought and high heat. And there are lots of vegetation that flow through our landscapes that could, if they're not controlled correctly, could pose a fire risk. So it's worthwhile warning people in terms of messaging. My question was kind of a little bit related to what Joe was saying in terms of having a patron or a high profile person to continue with the messaging. I just don't know whether that's something that we could think about. It doesn't need to be a politician, but is there someone in the community that people could relate to going forward, really? That's my question.
Thanks.
I think, yeah, Chair Jenny was definitely a champion for us at the Mayoral Forum, which was fantastic. But as far as having one figurehead for the campaign, we haven't ruled it out, but it's something we haven't completely landed on at this point in time. I think there's so many people across the region who do have that visibility, who do have different takes on climate change. One thing we've said about this is it's a platform for conversations, and we've seen that here this afternoon. Everyone has a different view, a different perspective, and we're really mindful of the fact that we need to keep it open. We need everyone to be able to have their say about it. Some of the queries we've responded to, there's been a spectrum of different perspectives, from everyone who's a climate change denier to people who think our messaging isn't hard enough. So as far as having one person, we certainly haven't ruled it out, but I think it is great to encourage multiple people across the region who have that visibility and that respect of their communities to get behind it and support it.
Kia ora. Thank you. Now, before I hand to Councillor Southworth, I was going to make a few comments, but also just to acknowledge Vicky and Elizabeth Mackenzie from last term, and just say well done on raising this with Council in 2019 and 2020 and getting the campaign underway. And it's great to see the work that has progressed from it. And from the conversations we've had and the presentation, first thing for me was, can we have a copy resent around the Tonkin and Taylor report that you mentioned, that the key messaging comes from? That might be a good refresher for people. I'm sure it's online somewhere or something, but just send us a link. And then I really liked seeing in there the connection to the action planning that we've talked about in briefings and things. So I really think that's critical, that connection now to the actual work that us and TLAs and of course landowners and others are doing. And we heard that actually from Bronwyn Hayward also in another briefing. And I think that's really important, that we, yes, tell stories, do give facts and figures when we can, but if we don't have them available because we just don't have the capacity to have those facts and figures, telling stories about the action that is going on both in the rural communities, on farm, about reducing emissions, the He Waka Eke Noa work, but also stories about like you're doing with Ngāti Whihi is great. So I really sort of implore that and say, let's carry on and tell more stories, because we got told that that's really important for people, to help them understand that we are doing some good things, and that, have heart and take heart from that. And yeah, that point about involving Te Rūnanga o Ngaitahu and Papatipi Rūnanga more, I think that's been heard. And I think recently we also had some pretty good, we had Tim Jarvis visit us. We had Bronwyn this morning. We want to get Rod to speak to us, and Rod did speak to the regional committee. And I think sharing those stories would be good as well, or getting highlights from those speakers, because all of those presentations that I've heard are great, and they're optimistic, but also say it like it is, but also optimistic of things we can do. So I think there's some really good stuff in that. So yeah, I'm going to hand to Councillor Southworth now and acknowledge you for your work. Thank you.
Jonathan, thank you for that, and thank you to staff really for picking it up and really turning it into something. So I couldn't. There's a tiny little seed of an idea, and it's been picked up brilliantly. I was just thinking in terms of, the comment that Councillor Edge made. I know there was a piece of work that was really good that came from Geography 309 project, I think it was, with some young geography students looking at good ways to communicate, which I think were actually relevant to all, broader range of age groups, around using people who look like the people you're trying to communicate with, and just simple little stories and messages. So they had a good piece of work on that. I don't know if that's fed into this and you're familiar with that, but it might be worth finding that. I can have a look for it. And then just in terms of the newsletter, so I personally like newsletters because it sort of sits static in my inbox and I can work through and I go, oh yeah, I'm interested, I'll have a look at that. Whereas the social media sort of, seem to feel like I miss so much. But there's only 515 subscribers, and I recognise you're talking about trying to up that, but that seems so low in comparison with like the hits through the social media and the website and so on. Is it actually worth pursuing newsletters still, or is it just a dying art and old-fashioned and really not worth the time?
Look, it's definitely worth pursuing. What we look at when information comes in is, how can we use this content? How can we repurpose it? Can we make it useful for someone to use on LinkedIn? Is it good for their social media? Would it make a good press advert, or is it simply content for the website on our news page, or do we put it out on the newsletter? So I guess a number of people have indicated they do like the newsletter. It's not a lot of extra effort for us to go to produce the newsletter, because that's content we're repurposing anyway. We will aim to build those numbers, but it hasn't been a huge focus for us in the last phase of the campaign. Really, we've been going, we've got to get the bones of it right to a point to where we move on. Take on your point about that report too, and the visuals and the graphics. And we're certainly keen to have more of a youth voice and representation on the subgroup. It's something that we've definitely aimed for and had a conversation about. But yeah, I think the newsletter's here to stay, but is it our main channel? Maybe not.
Sorry, if I could just say about the newsletter, something that the newsletters that were sent out at the beginning of the campaign were good, but they were essentially sharing content from other places. And a big part of our updating of the website was having that news section there that we can then have people coming back to our site through the newsletter. Previously, it would link to the TAs or stuff articles or things like that, but now we can actually have linking back to us. We've sort of put it on hold while we were redeveloping the website, and now that that's done and we do have some of our own content on there, that's why now is the time we're going to pick it back into gear and just really promote that there's a new newsletter out there, but also drive people towards that sign up page. So yeah, ideally we'll see that number go up.
Well, thank you. Nick, did you have one more question?
Just one more observation, and particularly from Joe's question, and using our sort of the like Phil Major, Peter Scott, in a kind of messaging. I'm not sure whether you've ever heard of this guy. His name is Simon Coffey. Simon Coffey is the Minister of the Environment for Tuvalu. And what he did actually was that he actually did an announcement about global warming, climate change, standing actually in about 3 foot of water. And it was actually one of the most impactful photographs. So if you had all the 10 mayors, as well as our 2, 8 and 2, however it works, I think that would be really something. Anyway, thank you.
Jonathan, thank you. Hey, great feedback, great update. Thank you so much. And we're going to move on to our resolution now. So yeah, thank you. That's all the questions. Yeah. Councillor Davies is keen to move. Councillor Southworth, you want to second this? Yeah, happy. So we've got a mover and a seconder. I'm assuming there's no discussion. We've had a pretty good go at this. So I'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Great, thank you. So that brings us actually to the end of our meeting. Next meeting is, what's our date? It's actually quite a while away, 6th of September. There's quite a big gap, but I'm assuming we probably would have some briefings in the meantime about some of the issues. And remember, the climate action planning stuff is taking place with the Mayoral Forum in June and August and stuff, so that's something to keep aware of. And I'll move to closing off our meeting now. And again, awesome to have Oscar and Alice here. It's great that we've done that today. Thank you to council. Thanks to all the staff. And yeah, look forward to our ongoing work in this area. I hear Karakia Whakamutunga o tātou nei hui. Kia tau nā manakitanga o nā me karo ki runga ki tēnā o tātou ko mahia te hua mā kihiki, kia toi te reo, kia toi te mana, kia toi te aroha, kia toi te reo Māori, uturu whakamoa kia tīna, haumia hui e tā ki e.